Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim, and I'm so excited to be here today. And I have a guest with me, and I can't wait to dive into the conversation. We're going to have so much to talk about. And I have Jamie Thurber with me here today. And I'm going to start with a quote, as I normally do. And I'm actually using one of Jamie's favorite quotes. So the quote is, be the change that you want to see in the world. Pause on that, right? Like that's beautiful. Why is it? Well, let's do two things. One, why is this quote, Jamie, so meaningful to you? And then tell us about yourself as well in your own words.
Okay. Thank you for having me, by the way. I'm excited. I love that. Quotes are my thing. So when you said, what's a good quote that you love? I'm like, ooh, perfect.
Yeah, I love quotes too.
So this quote for me, I feel like even before I knew that I was going to do what I'm doing now with my life, it was always something that anchored me, and it still does have the power to anchor me into, but wait a minute. Are you acting in a way that you're proud of? Are you showing up the way you want to? Are you in a big world? I think, especially over the past, 5-10 years, especially, like just lots of things have happened, I think, that have been just beyond our control. And then that's happened in my own personal life. And I think with the be the change quote, for me, it means so much because what we can control is how we act and how we treat people and how we want to give and be and exist in the world. And so it's a really good anchor that brings me back to center really quickly. It's become that for me. And no matter what the situation is, I feel like it always can bring me back to perspective pretty quickly. And it just feels really comforting to me every time too. I think that's important when you find a good quote that makes you feel good every time.
Yes.
That's a good one.
And you mentioned that you have it all over your office. So you have a ring with it, you have a plaque with it.
Yeah, I have this pretty plaque that sits here.
Be the change that you want to see in the world. Yes.
Yeah, right in front of me. And actually, a couple of years ago, I found a ring that I don't have any of my jewelry or my rings on today, but I have that just says it really small on it. And I've had it for a long time and just put it on every day.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it feels really in alignment also with I believe that we have the power to change in small shifts. That's how we change ourselves, is in these small increment shifts. And that's the same way when it comes to making big change and impacting anyone. I think that it comes down to those little pieces. So that's really what it stems from for me. For sure.
I love that. And let's talk about that some more as we get into the conversation, but tell us who you are and a little bit about your journey.
Awesome. So my name is Jamie, and I am a business and life coach. I help people specifically with intentional action in their businesses and lives, to where they can create something sustainable that not only can grow and have the success that they want, but also fits in with their lifestyle that they're wanting. And we actually we do our best to not get caught up in that rat race piece where we forget that life actually is something we get to enjoy. And so that's a big piece for me, is how by putting purpose and intention behind your actions, you can start to have a more fulfilling life, and you can have all of the things that you want to have. It just requires some foundation maintenance, some foundation building. So that's a really big piece of what I do for a living, what I do with my purpose. It's kind of I live that way. I do believe that I don't want to come in to any space and teach someone something that I'm not practicing. That's big and very important to me. And so I think that says a lot about who I am, in a lot of ways. And I live in Missouri. I live kind of out in the middle of nowhere now. And I love it, and have 3 doggies. I'm a dog mom, and just do my best to give as much as I can while also giving back to myself. That's been a really big journey for me lately, is just reminding myself to get that deeper connection with myself as much as possible, so I don't get lost in the shuffle of the internet world. Because my business is mainly virtual. I do have a few clients in Missouri, but I've been doing this for about 8 years. And full time for 8 years. And up until the first like 4 years of my business, I didn't even have anyone local. It was people from all over the place. And so I love that about this, the internet, right? I love that about the internet. Like, I'm so happy about it.
Me too. We wouldn't be doing this otherwise. I'm in New York and you're in Missouri. So I hear you on that. So you just said something about when you're doing your business, you have to be in alignment. In other words, you practice what you preach. You have to live it in order to teach it. Yeah. So, and that's so key, right? With life. And that goes along with Masks Off, because Masks Off is about being in alignment with your true and authentic self. It's about being real, taking 100% responsibility for your patterns, your limiting beliefs, your inner child, and the masks that we have put on over time. So that being said, are there any particular masks that you either have worn in the past and you have since healed or been able to remove, or you've really recognized that pattern and it's less prevalent now? And or do you have masks that you're still currently grappling with on a day-to-day?
Oh yeah. So I definitely think both. I think there's always layers, to each thing, especially if you're constantly and continuously growing. I think there's always layers to some of the masks, and you're like, oh man, you sneaky little guy, why are you still here? Like, that's kind of what I feel like. How are you here? I thought we dealt with you. Like, wait a minute. And it's just a different version. Something that came to mind when you were saying that was a few years ago, I was at a business conference and I heard Dan Clark speak. And if you've never heard him speak, you should look him up. He's really, really good. And he said something that I thought was really cool. And he was talking about how, you go to a conference and you're all jazzed up, right? And you're like, I'm going to do all these things. And then you leave, and that momentum, it's like, who are you when you leave there? But his most impactful thing he said to me was, what if you only preached what you practice? And I was like, oh. And so in a mask piece, I would do two things, I believe. There was this hyper independence piece that comes from trauma, that comes from, I can do all of this myself. I don't need any of you. Like, even though you don't believe in me, I can do it anyways. And then there was also this piece of I had to be almost perfect. And I never used that word because it never resonated with me. There was never like a perfectionist feel to it to me. It was more like I had to be perfect at doing all of the things that I was giving to clients to do, or I wasn't worth it. My worth didn't exist. And so when I heard that, and you just brought it back up in my mind, it was such a game changer for me, because it made me start to kind of identify places where I actually was only preaching what I was practicing. It was more the pressure of thinking I had to do everything myself, thinking that none of it was good enough. And then also this comparison. So I probably just named like 4 masks.
Yes, you did. You just named a lot.
Well, they all kind of, I feel like a lot of times those kind of clump together in a lot of cases. And so it was more of a, wait a minute, what if you looked at real life? What are you actually doing? And give yourself credit for that. And so that helped me start to heal that. And it's something I still check myself on regularly is, wait a minute, you do live that way. Like, you do live of integrity, and that is yours and yours alone. No one else impacts that but you. And reminding myself of that regularly, I think that's the healing process for me a lot of times, is catching those stories. I know Brene Brown talks a lot about like the story you tell yourself. And I love that analogy. And that was one, again, that was like a game changer for me, was being able to recognize that and just recognize how human it is. Because I think there was a piece there where when all of those masks were really full-fledged in place, there was a fear, and there was a lot of storytelling going on in my head of what I wasn't and what I needed to be versus what I was. And that's where the power really lies. And I think for me, even in that, like the fight of growing my business and making more money and making more impact, it didn't happen in a way that felt good when those masks were in full effect either. I feel like that really blocks people in a lot of cases. I know that it did for me. It's like, oh, let me do all of this logistical work to be better and have more impact and more exposure and all of these things. But if what I've learned, what I believe is if you're not living in that authentic place and letting yourself see your own worth and value, it's really difficult to achieve these layers and these different levels. You hold yourself back without even realizing you're doing it because you're pushing, but it's not,
Yeah.
it's more of that force versus that like unhealthy pressure than
I
it is.
love what you're saying, and I can totally relate. And even though, like, I know I've done a ton of work and I have really addressed my perfection mask a lot, but it is tricky. Like you said, like it sneaks in there, like that sneakster, right? And I love that you quoted Brene Brown as well. And I'm going to quote something else that she says all the time, which she talks about: stay in your lane. She's a swimmer and she says, stay in your lane. And comparison is the death of creativity. So to go along with what you were just saying, I recently, only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, went on TikTok, right? Started. And I am comparing myself. I am looking at everyone's TikToks that are so like creative or polished or this or that. And I'm looking at other friends that I know that are on it, and I'm seeing how many likes they have and how many followers they have. And then I'm looking at mine. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm showing up authentically in my videos. But there is that attachment to the outcome. And I love what you said. There is, if I'm really honest and I go inward, there is this part of me that feels, that old part of me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy enough to be on TikTok. Maybe I'm not this and that. So I love that you bring all that up, because that is the key. I know that that is going to be the deciding factor for me with TikTok, is when I let go completely of outcome. I'm not doing it for likes or followers. I'm showing up authentically. I'm showing up 100% because I'm trying to help someone else who might hear my message or inspire. And it's also allowing me to step into my light and be the full version of myself. So I love that you brought that in.
That's awesome. It's funny. The world that we live in, it's tricky, right? It's so tricky because of what you just described. What a unique situation that 30 years ago didn't exist.
Right.
It wasn't a thing. And so we're having to learn. And I think we're having to learn that that is a real thing though. That's where it gets tricky, right? Is that the numbers and the stats that you get. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't even know where that notification came from.
It's okay.
I'm like, oh, my windows are closed. Those stats are real. We see them. They're in our faces. And as a business owner, you want to pay attention to them. So it's this tricky thing that I think we have to learn to navigate. That's hard. And nobody talks a lot about it, is that these are real numbers that you do have to be aware of, and then be able to turn. Somehow we're supposed to magically be able to like shut the door on it and then show up without worrying about it. It's very hard. I remember something that I think is maybe one that I deal with still, that I'm still trying to really even put words to, is that I want to, obviously I show up in the online space. And so it's important that people see what I'm doing. And so I want to see what other people are doing, but then the comparison part comes in. So I'll go for a really long period of time without looking at what anyone else is doing. And then that feels really weird to me because I'm like, but wait a minute, I want all of you to look at my stuff, but I can't look at yours because it's distracting me.
Oh, I so get that more than you know.
It's this odd catch-22, and I think to an extent, it's almost like that's a place where we can choose to have, or we can work on building like a discipline muscle, maybe is a healthy thing to call it, to where we're not just scrolling right all the time. We can pay attention to people we admire and what they're doing and let it inspire us. But I do tell like my clients a lot, if an influencer or someone that you're following makes you feel bad about yourself, this is not someone that you should be following.
Yeah.
Even if that's not their intention, it doesn't matter. But if you look at it and you're like, oh, and it makes you feel not good, or like there's something wrong with you, then that's That's always a good, tale that maybe you need to pause them or mute them or whatever that is for 30 days, that little thing you can do. While you work on your own focus and your own strength as far as like you said, the worth part and the value piece. For me, to your original question, as far as like how I've healed a lot of that stuff, journaling is a huge key for me. It really is, because it helps me. I'm an overthinker.
Yeah.
Big time. My brain does not, I have had to learn how to stop it and say, wait a minute. But journaling helps me because it gets it out. I visualize, and I'm a writer. So that I love writing. So that kind of is natural for me, but I did have to learn how to utilize that tool and kind of visualize it actually just like coming out of my head and onto the paper. And by looking at that, it would help me kind of see between the story and the truth, to start to identify some of those masks that I would swear to you didn't exist, Like, I don't have that. No, not me.
Can you give us one example?
Oh yeah. So the hyper independent thing was something that a coach of mine, her name is Jessie Mendez, and it was probably up until like, I don't know, 8 months ago, 7 months ago, like she would say that to me because she's like, this is something we both have. Like I have hyper independence as a trauma response too. And I would be like, no, that's just my personality. This is how I've been my whole life. You're crazy. Like basically like, that's not me. And because sometimes when we hear perfectionism or overthinking or this or that or the other thing, we get defensive inside of our body, has like a reaction. Like, no, never would I be that person, And so I had to have those real moments when I feel like when you can practice some self-awareness and give yourself your mind places or, spaces through your day or your week to freely think, those comments, like her saying, yeah, your hyper independence, it would come up when something that I was doing was that was hyper independent would happen. I'd hear that in my head and I'd be like, dang. And so then I couldn't avoid it.
Yes.
Okay, that is what it is. And it's not a bad thing. I think that's the piece for me, is all these masks that we put on for a reason. That doesn't mean we have to wear them forever. We can choose to release ourselves from those things. That's healthy. But we have to acknowledge, and when we can just acknowledge without judgment that we put them on for a reason, that was what I got to with the hyper independence, where it was like, yeah, you did do that. And it served you in a lot of ways. It protected you, it served you. And so like you said, with the inner child piece, it's recognizing, wow, like little Jamie is over here being hyper independent, so she doesn't have to feel inferior or like somebody might let her down, or maybe she wasn't chosen, or like those pieces, to where we can maybe start to have compassion for the masks that we have. Doesn't mean we have to like choose to pick them up, put them on every day. But I think that was a big release for me of letting go of the judgment, because that trigger initially of like, that's not me, pure judgment.
And that's key. That's key, is letting go of the judgment. And we both said how those masks can sneak in, right? That other layer. And I believe that it takes a lifetime. It'll be a lifetime of peeling back the layers of the onion, is another way of saying removing the masks. I don't think that we'll ever completely take a mask off and put it down. There's just going to be these little nuances that still creep in. And I also love what you said about the not judging piece. It's about integrating. For me, I always wanted to push that part of me aside because it caused me too much pain. So I wanted to avoid the pain. So it's like, oh, I got to get rid of the people pleaser in me. It's too painful. I have to get rid of the perfectionist in me. I have to heal it. And no, what I really have to do, and I am doing now, is integrating that part of me. Oh yes, there's the people pleaser still. There's the part of me that still feels that I have to take care of my 93-year uncle because I have to be the good little girl. And then like, then there's this other self like, okay, I see you. I see you. And it's okay. And then my adult self comes in and says, okay, well, how can we do this with compassion? And where can we set boundaries? So it's integrating the both parts. And then it's also at the same time learning to take different action as well. Like you said, you're like, oh, dang, I do have that hypervigilant, right? You're like, oh, shoot, I got to deal with this now. But that's good because that's taking 100% responsibility for seeing your part. And it's the only part that you have control over. And if you want to grow and evolve, we have to change our patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what a powerful thing to recognize too, because I think that out in the world, there was a point where when I'm doing my own self-discovery and reading all these books and blogs of spirituality online and things, there is a lot of people who tell you that you have to get rid of these pieces of you, like they're bad.
Yeah.
And I have a friend of mine who he's like one of the most enlightened humans I know, I swear. And some of the things he says, I'm like, wow, you're so smart. But he told me, he said, what's good or bad? Like what's right or wrong? Like who says who, you know? And so that's something I come back to with these self-judgments and these masks is like, well, who says that that's a bad thing? And what if we, like you said, with my therapist calls it a council, the council of like the pieces of us.
Yes.
We'll have these little sit downs, you know,
Love
bring
it.
them all in, let's bring in all the people, let's talk to everybody. And it's super funny.
I love that.
It's super funny. Like if anyone else could hear our conversation right now, that was completely insane, but that's okay. But it does, because those are pieces that make up who you are. And they have their purposes. So what I've learned with the hyper independent person, she's really, really a go-getter. She gets a lot done, right? She is the girl. At one point in my business, I was the motivation, productive, get as much done as you can girl. Like that was a piece of my business when I started. That was a big thing I talked about a lot. And that part of me was driving the show. She's why I was able to run big businesses before I had my own, why I was able to get so much done, why I have a lot of content, like all of those pieces. So what I've been really working on this past year is learning when it's okay to tell her to just go for it and take the reins, and when to be like, whoa, not all the time though. You don't get to control every single decision we make, because that puts me back into an unhealthy place. And so that's been an interesting, instead of being like, you stop completely, you don't get to exist anymore, when that's kind of part of my, that's one of my power pieces. I think these are pieces of who we are. They're pieces of what make us great. And so if we were to just say, nope, sit down, you're not allowed to talk anymore, then I think we go through and I've done that. I've gone through a place where I felt pretty lost. Like I didn't know what to say online. I didn't know how to show up. Like it felt weird when it never felt weird. And I think it was because at one point I needed to tell that girl just to stop talking. Like she wasn't allowed to exist anymore. And this other person, this super relaxed Zen person, was supposed to take over, and was, well, you can be both. Like, why can't you be both? And so I feel like that's a big lesson for me, was learning how, and continuously, learning how to let the different parts of you shine in places that that are beneficial. Yeah. It's an interesting, like, project managing the pieces of yourself kind of deal.
I love that. And that is such a beautiful description of integration. It's beautiful. So something you mentioned there, I heard a little bit about balance, and that's one of the things that you like to talk about as well, like balancing life and business. Can you tell us a bit about that, how you've gotten to that place?
Yeah. So there's a few pieces. So when I was the plan, get everything done girl all the time, and that was the only part, what I was doing was I used like a color coding system in my planner that would allow me to visually see balance, where I was off balance and not balanced. So meaning, work related things were green, personal things were pink, health and fitness was green or was blue. And so I could visually look at it and see where I might be missing something. Which was really, that's something that I teach people at the beginning of our work together as they're kind of starting to get their grasp. And it really helps. And I still do it because it does help me. Like my Google Calendar is color coded like that. But then there's this other step of actually doing it and of living that way. And so what I think is, there's an old proverb that I teach a lot that is, if you want to have success or happiness, I'm going to word it completely wrong, but you have to step in each house or each room in your house every day. And you could hear this where if you want a study table, all of the legs need maintenance, or there's lots of different versions of it. But I teach this thing called the wheel of intentional living. And in that, it's the different areas of your life and how if you're only putting all of your attention into business, other things suffer. We all know this. We've done it. Our health suffers. Our relationships are suffering. We don't even we've had no time to ourselves. Like all of these things are happening when we hyper focus in one area. So what I think happens, or what we can do is, do I think that we will always have perfect balance? I don't know that that's possible. And that's not what we're striving for. What we're striving for is the acknowledgement of how each piece feeds the others. So I like to show it in a wheel to where if you're missing a piece of the wheel, then it can't roll smoothly, right? And so even if it's a little off balance, it could still roll. But if it's missing a whole chunk, then it's just going to stop. And so with that, it's interesting because when I start to explain that to people, everyone's immediate reaction is, that's not possible. I don't have enough time for that. Not a thing, which is in a way almost a defense mechanism, which we could even refer to as a mask.
Could be.
For me, what it was, what if I actually could have all of these things at the same time? If I could be healthy and fit and have a great relationship, make a lot of money, and have a good relationship with my family and have fun. Like, what if I had all of those pieces and they were all really good? Like, talk about, and then it was like all the fear for me. And so it's interesting how we'll react to those things, but I think it's, again, like you said, a lifelong journey, and it's a daily check-in piece of, because sometimes something happens and your business is going to take more energy, or your job's going to take more energy. Or sometimes, like right now, we found out our dog had cancer and he had to have his leg amputated.
Sorry.
So right now, thank you. It's been rough, but he's better and we're working through it. But right now, what's happening in my house and my family is taking more energy, and it will take more of my attention. And what's cool about that is, because I practice this so regularly, my foundation's really strong. So the other parts are they where I would feel the most comfortable with them? No, but they're not crumbling. And so that's the way I like to talk about balance. I think that when we approach it, it's not like this mystical thing that we're trying to constantly achieve. I think it's just more of a real look at what we're doing and trying to be more intentional with where we're putting our time. So we can be happier.
Yeah, I love that. And we have to cultivate that, and we have to create the life of our choosing. And that's something I've been stepping into. That's a new space that I'm stepping into lately. I used to just be, because I was a stay-at-home mom for 23 years, and my life was centered around, what did my kids need? What did my elderly parents need? And so I was just like reacting to the day, just going through the day. And now in the last year or so, I'm intentional about creating the life of my choosing. And I'm intentional about, as best as I can, balancing my mind, my body, my spirit, and then I've added in business goals. So I literally, and I'm such a list person because I'm a Virgo, so I have to have my lists, and I get such satisfaction out of checking them off. And if it gets the job done, who freaking cares? So I literally, every day on my checklist, abs, stretch, some kind of cardio, meditate, read daily meditation, drink 64 ounces of water, literally for every part of that. And then post on social media once a day, whatever. and then I check it off. Now, granted, there are times, like you said, with your dog, or if something happens to my uncle or one of my kids, that will take over. But it's for a short period of time. And then I usually can get through those types of crisis situations so much better because I've been watering my garden all along. So,
Yeah.
if it's a little drought for like no rain for a week or so, no big deal. It's really well nourished.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like to say to my clients sometimes when the storm happens or something, like, this is why we practice.
Yeah.
This is why we practice, so that we're not going to fall down. And if we do, we're going to get right back up. It's not going to crumble. We have all the tools. It's such a big thing. It's such a powerful play as well. I think a lot of people, the world tells you that the power play is like, go hard and don't ever stop, when the real power play is to be able to notice everything that you just said and to be able to negotiate those things, because that takes a type of strength that you have to cultivate. That takes a type of mindset that you have to cultivate. It's not that difficult to switch your head into, I'm going to ignore everything and work. We can all do that but what at the risk of what other things happening. Like for me, I have a lot of health concerns and health issues that, when I was working in a job, I would wind up in the hospital at least once a year for multiple days on IVs because I was just drained. Like I did not take care of myself because it was what I had to do to be successful in this industry, and which is not true. But I didn't know any better then, and so many people don't know those things. And so it's just interesting. And I'm so glad. So thank you for having this conversation and putting it out to the world, because I think these things need to be talked about more, because kind of like what I was saying when I was talking about Brene Brown, there's just this humanness to each and every single one of us that we tend to forget for some, I don't know how we forget it, but we do. Yeah. Or so we're human beings and you have feelings and emotions, and that thing was hard, even though you might not feel like it was, so there's just, there's this level of grace that we can provide ourselves. And that doesn't mean we just give up and sit down and do nothing. But it's quit being so dang hard on yourself, which is easier said than done. That's my biggest mask now. And my biggest struggle now still is always just like, wait a minute, why are you being so hard on yourself?
I love that.
Calm that down. Look at everything you did do. I do a celebration list. And then I didn't make that up. I learned it from the woman who, what's her handle? The Champagne Diet is what it is. She's written a few books, but one of the things she calls it your celebration list.
Yeah.
So when you feel like you're not doing anything, or you haven't gotten anything done today, sit down and write down all the things that you have
done, and you'll feel much differently for sure.
And you look and say, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Most of the time, especially anybody I know who's a mother, they write that list and they're like, oh, wow. Okay. Like it's even more extreme when you're a mom and all the things that you're doing that you just don't think, you just do.
And they're important.
Very important. And they take time and they take your energy. And so we just don't even acknowledge that as things that we've accomplished when it should be.
I agree. So I love that celebration list. So I know I could personally go on and talk with you for so long. This is such a great conversation. And I feel like we're really connecting and aligning, and at the same time being mindful of the viewers and listeners' time as well. So we could always have another conversation at another time, but the way that I will round out our time together today is with 5 rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So they're easy peasy. You did mention a little bit, but maybe there's a different one. What is the most prominent mask that you wear?
I would say it is, what a tough question, right? I'd say that it is it's the integrity piece. It's I have to very much have to be this of integrity and you must know it, versus just allowing my actions that are that to speak for themselves.
Got it. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Ooh, Ireland.
Hmm. What's your favorite way to take care of yourself?
This time of year, it's the garden. It's gardening. But I do have quite a few houseplants, my upstairs specifically. So houseplants, gardening, like it gets me out of my head, and it always makes me feel better.
Beautiful. If you have a bucket list, what's the number one thing on it?
Oh, I don't have an official bucket list.
Okay.
But I would say a top thing is taking my parents to the Grand Canyon. My mom talks about it all the time, and we're getting her past her fear of flying. So we're working on it. We might just drive. We'll figure it out, but that's definitely in the works.
Awesome. Awesome. Name one book that changed your life.
The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Awesome.
No doubt. And every time I read it, it changes my life, I feel like.
That's awesome. That is a good one. So how can the viewers, listeners reach you if they wanted to? How can they get in touch with you?
So I'm on all the socials, and on Instagram, it's Jamie Thurber or Jamie.Thurber. On Facebook, it's jamiethurber.biz, or just my personal profile. I post a lot. It's just my name. But my website's jamiethurber.com. Okay. There's a contact box on there, as well as my email is real simple. It's just me, like me, at jamiethurber.com. And we respond to everybody through that and filter things that way. So I'm available in all those places. I'm pretty much an open book. So I'm pretty good about getting back to people if they have things to say or questions or whatever.
Beautiful.
We post stuff all the time, just value as much as we can. So
that's great. You mentioned something about you have, maybe it's on your website, or you have like a freebie, like something that they can go through.
Yeah, I actually have, I do have a journaling guide on there for someone who's wanting to start journaling. It's just a free download of prompts and a video of like explaining ways to use journaling. And that's on my website. You can see like resources. And then there's also an ebook that's called 10 Steps to Being More Confident. And it's something I wrote a long time ago, actually, based upon my experience working in a male dominated industry as the youngest girl, like the youngest person and being a woman. And so walking into rooms and how I learned to really utilize different tools to exude confidence and to feel better and to put myself in these positions that were productive and were on my terms. And so I wrote it's a real simple ebook, but it's 10 steps, and that's a free download as well. That's in that resources tab.
Awesome. And of course, I'll have all of this in the show notes as well, so it'll be easy to find. So thank you so much for being here today, Jamie. This was a great conversation, so valuable and so needed. So thank you for all that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. You're very welcome. It was great. What a great way to spend some time today. I really appreciate it.
Me too. Me too. So thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you liked the content of this podcast, I would love for you to either subscribe, like, or comment, and I will see you next time on Masks Off.